Mars, Saturn, and Uranus show off their kinder, gentler side next on Horoscope Highlights.
Hey, Joji here, Astrology Hub's podcast producer and an astrologer over at Astrologer Connect. I just wanted to let you in on a little secret. As a Horoscope Highlight subscriber, you actually get a limited time exclusive 30% off deal on Christopher's upcoming course, Ruling Planets for Unruly Times. You know this course is for you if you want to learn your chart better, if you want to get to know the planets, especially the one that Christopher calls your guardian angel, and if you want to learn what all the planets mean through all the 12 signs. All you have to do is go to astrologyhub.com/ruling planets. You have to do it really quick though, because the offer is only available until April 26th. So this Wednesday. Again, it's astrologyhub.com/ruling planets. I hope to see you there.
Hello, my name is Christopher Renstrom, and I'm your weekly horoscope columnist here on Astrology Hub. And this week, I wanted to talk to you about the Sun-Saturn sextile, followed by the Mars-Uranus sextile, which will be taking place on April 25th and April 29th, respectively. Sextiles. Sextiles are one of my favorite aspects in astrology. When I was a younger astrologer in my earlier days, I used to scoff at the idea of sextiles. I'd be like, sextiles, they're kind of like the poor man's trine. And I didn't really give them much mind. But over the years, as wisdom began to be accrued, I began to realize how very important the sextile is, and that although it's not really a trine, in my opinion, it's just as good, if not perhaps better, than the trine itself. Why? A trine is a relationship, a harmonious relationship, that exists between, let's say, two planets in different signs, but the same element. For instance, let's say you have the moon in Cancer, trining the Mars in Scorpio. The moon and the Mars are made harmonious because of the affinity that exists between the two water signs, Cancer and Scorpio. So basically, one planet is going to support the other planet in its endeavors. A sextile is a similar relationship between two planets, but instead of being the same element, they are basically what we would call the same gender. In astrology, which has a 2,500-year history, the elements were divided into two genders, which were masculine and feminine genders. It can also be understood as aggressive and passive, or yin and yang. The feminine genders, or the feminine elements, were elements that were associated to life and growth. And that was obviously the elements of earth and water. So although earth and water are not the same element, they understand one another naturally and easily. I mean, if you're growing a seed or a plant, you plant the plant in earth and you water it, and the plant grows and thrives. Okay, so basically earth needs water in order to grow things, and this is what exists in sextiles. So they're not the same, it's not water on water or earth on earth. There's a difference, but they're aimed at accomplishing the same goal. And in the case of earth and water, it's always growth and productivity. So what we're having taking place this week, the first sextile, both sextiles, by the way, will be taking place in the elements of earth and water. What we have taking place this week initially is is a sextile between the Sun in Taurus and Saturn in Pisces. So how are we going to go ahead and interpret something like that? First of all, I want to sort of touch very quickly on the word aspect. Aspect, if you look it up in a dictionary, the first line of definition will be that it comes from astrology, that it is an astrological term. I love that the word aspect comes purely from astrology. There's another word that comes from astrology, and that's influence, and we'll get to that another time. So an aspect is basically, if you go on and read in this dictionary explanation, it is a particular part or feature based on our view. So essentially what this means is that planets have their meanings in astrology. The sun is what I know about myself to be true, the moon is what I feel about myself to be true, etc. And you can even have benefic and malefic planets. Benefic planets are planets that join together and bring good things, and malefic planets are planets that rate you or create a parting of the ways and usually bring bad things or malevolent things into your lives, things that we don't particularly like. So we're dealing with two malefics this week, which are Mars and Saturn. And then although Uranus isn't a malefic, the modern planets Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are neither benefic or malefic. Uranus still has a reputation for revolution and change, which basically translates as upsetting the apple cart or upsetting your best expectations, usually by surprise or through some kind of unpredictability. So when we have an aspect, which can be a conjunction, a square, a trine, a sextile, all right, when we have an aspect, what we're really talking about is a relationship between two planets. And we're also talking about a view, an approaching view or a departing view of that planet. So whereas Saturn, which is the planet of tests, trials, and tribulations, and has a bit of a bad reputation, whenever we see a Saturn transit, we're going to be like, oh my goodness, I'm going to be put through the paces, or I'm going to face some sort of obstacle or difficulty in my life. When Saturn sextiles another planet, like for instance, it's sextiling the Sun on April 25th, then what we see is a different feature, a different aspect of Saturn's character. All right. So whereas a square might be more combative or difficult, and an opposition, a parting of the ways, the sextile aspect that the Sun is making to Saturn is showing, as I said earlier, a kinder, gentler side. So how do we interpret this? We know that Saturn is a planet associated with tests, trials, and tribulations. And Saturn can also be a planet that's associated with endings. All right, so I think it's very interesting that this aspect between the Sun in Taurus that's being formed to Saturn in Pisces, we take the idea that Pisces is the last of the zodiac signs. So we have Saturn here in Pisces. And one way that we might be able to interpret that is you can't go back the way you came. So wherever you are in your progress in this year, 2023, now that Saturn is in Pisces, you might look over your shoulder and think, well, maybe I'll head on back in that direction. Things aren't so nice here. They're not so simple. They're not turning out the way that I expected. So maybe I'm going to turn around and go back the way that I came. So Saturn in Pisces, because it's in the sign that precedes Taurus, so it's behind Taurus, right? We go Saturn, Aries, Taurus, okay? So Saturn in Pisces is standing there saying, no. And we might be like, well, why can't I go back the way I came? And Saturn in Pisces is saying, no, the door is closed. Proceed, continue on your way. And so we're like, I guess I have to continue on my way. And this is what Saturn behind the Sun in the sky is doing. It's saying you can't go back the way you came. You must continue up along your way. And so there's something in that, having an option or choice removed in that sort of way. The other thing that we can see with the particular relationship between Saturn and the Sun, and it's based on the idea of Saturn being the planet of tests, trials, and tribulations, is that Saturn teaches. We know that Saturn is a teacher, so that Saturn teaches, but Saturn often teaches by introducing a challenge or a test. We all know that, and so maybe we pass the test, maybe we don't, etc. But there's another way that Saturn teaches through testing, and it's not just whether you got the answer right or wrong. Saturn teaches through tedium, all right? So Saturn teaches by repeating the test over and over and over again in your life. And these might be things that we hit upon, like, I can't believe that I'm having problems with money again, or I can't believe that I've been rejected in love again, or I can't believe that I was up for promotion and I'm being passed over again. Okay, so we may say this to ourselves in terms of like, I'm always being tested in the area of money. I'm always being tested in the area of love. I'm always being passed over, and I know I'm better than the person that they're taking over me again. And so we feel like this is something that is a continual problem. And the thing that Saturn does, because it is a planet that's associated with triggering our anxieties and fears, it's associated with triggering our fear of rejection. If we go through something again and again and again and again, enough times that we're saying, this is the story of my life, in love, or this is the story of my life with my career, or this is the story of my life with my dreams, or this is the story of my life with money. I'm always hitting this wall again and again and again. What might have begun as a tremendous fear of rejection and love, or tremendous fear of never making it, or tremendous fear with not being able to balance a checkbook, because it occurs again and again and again and again, the magnitude of that fear, where it might have started very, very high, over a period of tedium, with the repetition of that test, of that trial, of that tribulation again and again and again, the magnitude lessens. All right? It's not as paralyzing. It's not as overwhelming. It's not as impossible. It actually kind of takes on the form of like a headache, or maybe even a joke. And this is something that I'm offering to you as an insight with this Saturn sextile the Sun on April 25th. You may be facing a situation, and the Sun is in Taurus, so it might have to do with love, because Venus can be associated to Taurus, or money, that can also be associated to Taurus, in which you're facing this, for the upteenth time. And whereas before you used to maybe curse your fortune, or say, this is the story of my life, or I'm picking up my things and leaving, and I don't have to deal with this again, Saturn, over its repetition, has worn you down to such a point where you can either accept, in resignation, this is the way it's going to be, and I'm so sick and tired of being sick and tired that I'm not going to try anymore. Or it can be like, let's give it one more go. Let's give it one more try. Let's see what happens this time. Maybe I'll be surprised. Something like that. But the tedium has reduced the fear to such a point that what used to be a tall order or a high step is now a lowered threshold. So what I would ask you to do is to try on that thing that you can't do one more time this week. And you may actually find the door opening, or you crossing over the threshold with a great deal of ease. Now, moving on to the next sextile, we're looking at Mars, we're looking at Mars in Cancer, and we're looking at Uranus and Taurus. Okay, we know that Uranus is the planet of revolution and change. Uranus is the planet that's going to knock over the fixtures in your life. It's going to knock over the game board where all the pieces have been strategically placed, and it's going to send them flying. This is what Uranus does with the delightful Okay, Uranus knocks over the game board and sends all the pieces flying in your life, the ones that you've worked very hard to place at particular angles with an idea that this is how I will win the game. All of that is knocked over, upside down, and sent flying. But that's Uranus, usually like with a conjunction per se, or a square, or an opposition. But with a sextile, we see a different aspect of Uranus's face. With a sextile, Uranus goes from being revolutionary to revelatory. All right, so it makes the switch in vowels and consonants from revolutionary to revelatory. It's going to enlighten, or it's going to show you. But it's not ahead of the road, it's behind you. In other words, Mars is in Cancer. Cancer is further along in the zodiac than Taurus is. So Uranus is playing a supportive role in this revelation. Okay, it's supporting Mars in its forward motion. So Mars, that's a planet that says, that's what I want, and it goes out and gets it. It rushes after it. It's the planet of gumption and drive. Mars's job in your horoscope is to get you what you want. And getting you what you want can take on 12 different versions of that idea according to the 12 different signs of the zodiac. Now, Mars in Cancer has a lot of difficulty getting what it wants. Why? Because Mars is in fall in the zodiac sign of Cancer. That's its dignity by sign. It's in fall. And what that means is that Mars is more apt to retreat than it is to progress forward in the zodiac sign of Cancer. Oftentimes it beats retreats, or it wrestles with itself about whether it can do something or not, whether it wants to show its hand, whether it wants to make a bold statement or a risky move. And when it's in Cancer, it has a tendency to become much more timid, to be like, I know I should, but no, I can't. I need to press forward, but no, that's not going to happen. I can't do that. This isn't the right time. So it's not a restraint. It's really kind of a fear that overcomes the Mars in Cancer. And what that comes from is Cancer the crab has a tendency to approach the things that it wants in life circuitously out of fear of being exposed or preyed upon, defeated. Okay, so there can be a strategic side to Cancer because it's very much about, I'm not going to take the direct approach. I'm going to camouflage myself and cover over my traces as I sneak up on something. This is usually how Cancers will approach things in life. But with the Mars there's a tendency to almost be like, I can't do this. The fear of rejection or the fear of loss can be really quite great. And so when you speak to a Mars in Cancer, you can't really do the typical Marsy things that you would do with a Mars in Cancer. You can't say, get over yourself, or come on, let's do it, or, pump it up. These Mars in Cancer is not going to respond to that at all. It's going to be like, this is embarrassing, and and don't talk to me like that, and this isn't going to work, and I'm going to leave this situation right away. But the struggle that people who have Mars in Cancer have is that they still want what they wanted. Okay, so they might have talked themselves out of purchasing something, or they might have decided to postpone an action, but there's still this feeling of, I want it, and why didn't I get it? And so they're brought back to taking that action again. And that's almost the loop that people with Mars in Cancer can get into. So they're afraid to proceed. They're afraid to go forward, but they can't really leave what they want either. So what is this marvelous Uranus and Taurus sextile to Mars and Cancer going to do? Well, what it's going to do is that Uranus is going to change the circumstances in some way. Remember how Saturn in its sextile to the Sun said, nope, you can't go back? Uranus is going to change the circumstances in such a way that the circumstances that perhaps the Mars in Cancer was clinging to in such a way that they are no longer there. So what would be a good image for this? How about Uranus in Taurus is probably going to pull the rug out from underneath your Mars in Cancer. Okay, so it's going to pull the rug out from underneath and maybe send the Mars in Cancer flipping upside down and maybe perhaps, let's say, splashing into the swimming pool. They've been avoiding the swimming pool and they flip upside down and they, fall into the swimming pool and they discover that the water is fine. Or they flip upside down and they land again, but they happen to land on both feet and they discover that they got through that. So there's going to be this feeling of the rug suddenly being pulled out from under you, and that Mars in Cancer instinctively being able to not only recover, but actually to move forward, to discover the thing that they were so afraid of or telling themselves that they could not do is actually very doable. And, Mars in Cancer may even feel kind of like, hey, I'm in my element. I can do this. This isn't such the big deal or the frightening thing that I thought it was before. So this week with the sextiles, it's It's moving forward in not exactly the most ambitious or driven ways, but it's nevertheless moving forward. And sextiles, because it is the nature of sextiles to help you, what you might be experiencing is a bit of a tough love aspect to this week's sextiles, but there's no doubt that they're here. There's no doubt that they're here to get you over a hurdle that has stymied you for far too long. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Horoscope Highlights. Please don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. Your support means a lot. See you next week.